Welcome to episode 327 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak encouragement into the hearts of educators and get you informed and energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm talking with Jonathan Haidt about why he believes we need less technology in our schools and that we need to focus instead on cultivating a play-based childhood for our young people. Visit truthforteachers.com for an easy-to-read, easy-to-share version of this podcast episode. Hey, elementary podcast listeners, I want to tell you about Teacher Summer Talks. It's a free audio summit packed with practical tips from more than 20 veteran educators, including me. Each episode is just 10 to 15 minutes, so you can listen while commuting, setting up your classroom, or relaxing by the pool. No screens, no Zoom fatigue, just solid ideas you can use, delivered straight to your headphones. You'll also get access to a private Facebook group to connect with other educators and join in on fun giveaways. And if you want even more, upgrade to the VIP Pass for 25 printable resources to use this fall. Check the show notes for my affiliate link to sign up. That means I earn a small commission if you upgrade at no extra cost to you. This is PD that works on your schedule. Grab your headphones and let's go. Teacher Summer Talks. Today's guest is Jonathan Haidt, a social psychologist, professor at NYU's Stern School of Business, and author of several influential books, including, most recently, The Anxious Generation. You may have heard Jonathan in recent interviews talking about how smartphones and social media are impacting kids' mental health. But I wanted to bring him on this show to go deeper, specifically from an educator's point of view. Our conversation builds on some of the past episodes that I've done around screen time, attention spans, and how tech is changing the way that kids are showing up in the classroom. If you've ever felt like your students are less focused, more anxious, shorter attention spans, or just harder to connect with than they used to be, you're not the only one. And John's work helps explain why that is. In this episode, we talk about the research on when things really started to shift and what's behind that shift. We discuss why EdTech may have widened equity gaps rather than closing those gaps. We talk about his case for distraction-free, phone-free schools and what his research has shown us about best practices. And we talk about why play and real-world independence and autonomy are so essential, not just for kids to have fun, but for healthy brain development and learning. This is a true back and forth conversation in which John and I are learning from each other. And I think it's going to validate a lot of what you've already sensed as a teacher and give you some of the background information to understand more about what's happening in your classroom. Let's get into it. So I've got Jonathan Haidt here with me, and John, I am such a huge fan of your book, The Anxious Generation. And I think a lot of what you share about anxiety and antisocial behaviors and shortened attention spans is very apparent to teachers and others who work in K-12 schools. The effects are obvious, but the causes are harder to pinpoint. And the research you did for your book really helps fill that gap. Can you summarize the main factors contributing to the rise in anxiety among young people today and how that specifically relates to the school environment?
Sure. Well, first, let me say that I love teachers, and I can prove it because I actually dedicated the book to teachers. I'd already dedicated previous books to members of my family, so I decided, teachers are on the front line. Teachers are facing so much difficulty with these new problems.
Yeah.
So I dedicated the book for the teachers and principals at PS3, Lab Middle School, Baruch Middle School, and Brooklyn Tech. These are the schools my kids went to, who have devoted their lives to nurturing children, including mine. So I'm very glad to be talking to teachers. There's so much that you can do. There's so much that you're going through that makes your lives harder. So let's talk. I first noticed there was a problem because the students coming into universities in 2014, 2015 were just really different. They were much more anxious. Something was different about people born in 1996 and later. Now we know that they're Gen Z. And we didn't know what it was. And I wrote a whole book called The Coddling of the American Mind about how overprotection is partly what's causing this. And that's true. But I didn't know then, 2017, we didn't have good data on whether it was social media or phones. I mean, the timing was right, but we didn't really have a lot of studies to demonstrate it. Well, now we do. And so the way to think about this is something happened to kids, especially preteens, especially preteen girls around 2012. It's astonishing. I've arranged the evidence, the trends in mental health going back decades and across many countries. Certainly all the English-speaking countries, Northern Europe, it's very clear. All the countries, there was no sign of a problem until 2010, even 2011, no sign. Everything's kind of flat, bouncing around a bit, but no trend. All of a sudden, 2012, 2013, 2012 sort of an elbow, and then very sharp 2013 upward rise. So we have a very sudden international decline of mental health, which hits preteen girls the hardest in terms of the increases. What could that be? Some people say, oh, it must be the global financial crisis. Really? That hit preteen girls more than everyone else? It doesn't make any sense. And that was 2008. Why does this not start until 2012, 2013? So there is no other explanation on the table. No one has even offered another explanation. But what I'm proposing is just that these things are correlated in history. The kids move on to smartphones around 2011, 2012. iPhone comes out 2007, but teens don't really have it. They still have flip phones. And it's really 2010, you get the front-facing camera. 2012 is when Facebook buys Instagram, and it becomes super popular. So really 2012 is the transition year where the girls especially now all have an iPhone with a front-facing camera and an Instagram account. And this I'm calling the great rewiring of childhood. So a kid going through puberty in 2015, let's take the girl's case because that's clearest the link to social media. A girl going through, an 11, 12-year-old girl in 2015 going through puberty, she's on her phone. Everyone's talking about her face, her body, her hair, her skin. She's posting. She's not spending much time with other girls because now there's so much time. It's now 5 hours a day is nowadays the average of time on social media. So they don't see they're not connecting with other kids very much. This is what I've called the great rewiring of childhood. And it especially affected girls if we look at anxiety and depression. But now in our conversation, I think we're going to need to totally divide up. The mental health story is one story with one set of causes. And then I think the bigger story for education is actually the cognitive fragmentation, the destruction of the ability to attend, to focus, to read a book. That is a different story with different causes, and that's probably even bigger for teachers than is the mental health crisis.
Yeah, I agree. And I've had Jean Twenge on the show to talk
Great. Yeah,
about her research.
she was the first to really discover it. Yeah, I draw on her a lot.
Yes. And and she really made that strong connection between the smartphone and social media and what's going on. And I feel like your book expands on that and then also gets into this other pieces you're talking about with the continuous partial attention. So what's happening in schools? How is this rise in anxiety manifesting in schools?
So, well, teachers are seeing it just as, university professors, we all saw it beginning in 2014, 2015. There wasn't a mental health crisis in 2012, 2013. But of course, these are 18-year-olds coming in. And so I think schools started seeing it just a little bit earlier. But here's the confound, here's the complexity. At roughly the same time that all the kids got on iPhones, around 2012, that's when the EdTech revolution starts also, because the iPad comes out in 2010, 2011, I forget which year. And Apple is pushing it on schools. I don't know if they gave it for free or subsidized. Apple really wants to get kids onto the Apple ecosystem. Google develops the Chromebook. They're pushing it. Google rises to dominance around 2014, 2015. So what we have is the transformation of kids, the great rewiring of childhood with the smartphone especially, but also the tablet, also the iPad. And we also, and I didn't talk about this in the book because I didn't know, when I wrote the book, I didn't know enough about EdTech. Now I know a lot more. We also have the great rewiring of school. I mean, a quite literal rewiring of education so that most things or so much now runs through iPads and Chromebooks. And we were promised that this is going to revolutionize teaching. It's going to engage the students. It's going to bring scores up. And what happened? That's exactly when scores started going down. We now have good longitudinal data. We've got the NAEP. I'm sure your listeners know the NAEP, the National Assessment of Education Progress. Showed steady increases in education from the 1970s through 2012. Not big. It's very hard to, lift the country up, but we did. Like the education establishment, like school, like our students were actually performing better in 2012 than they had in previous decades. And then it starts going down. And people only noticed this a year and a half ago when the 2023 data came out, and people saw a big drop and said it was COVID. And there was a drop with COVID. but it didn't start in 2020. It started in 2012. And if there was a drop in COVID, why do you think kids knew so much less during COVID? It's not because of the virus. It's because all education was on their screens. And it's very hard for a child to learn anything if they have a computer or a tablet in front of them, because the distraction effects are enormous and they swamp any possible benefit. That's the conclusion. Again, I'm not an expert in this, but I have been reading a lot about it. And on my Substack, After Babel, I would urge anybody listening to this, please go to afterbabel.com. It's my Substack. It's like a blog. It's free. You don't have to pay anything. Everything. There's no paywall. And we now have a whole tab for educators. We have a lot of stories now from experts on EdTech. And the story is pretty clear. EdTech harms education. Now, I can't say, I'm sorry, let me change that. Putting a computer or a tablet on a kid's desk, the one-to-one devices, harms education. I'm increasingly confident about that. Having, the board, using a computer.
The smart board?
Yeah, smart boards, I don't know. It seems to me likely to help. I don't have a reason to think that those are harmful. But if you want kids to pay attention to you or to the kid next to them, which is fine with me, if they're socializing, that's a good thing. You can't have a touch screen on their desk. So you have to have phone-free schools. That's a must. There's no point in bringing kids to school if they have their phones. Just let them stay at home and swipe. So you got to have a phone-free school. That's a must. Bell to bell, morning to afternoon. And then schools, I think, are going to have to reevaluate all of the one-to-one device policies. And probably they should get rid of all of it. I mean, should you have a laptop cart for certain things? Maybe. Not in elementary school, I don't think. But, in high school, quite maybe. I just don't know. But to return to your question, about the anxiety, that all starts around 2012, 2013. I suspect that the anxiety is more from social media and the kids, especially the girls, being in this horrible attention economy, reputation game, all the stuff we'll talk about social media. But the declining test scores, I think, isn't so much social media per se. It's the videos, the distraction, there's always something more interesting, all these screens. So huge implications for schools.
It's interesting that you bring up that larger historical context of Apple and Google competing to get into schools. I've been in education since 1999. And so I saw that, and I saw Google take over in large part because Chromebooks are way cheaper than Apple devices. So it was an affordable option for schools. And, the goal for years was to go one-to-one devices. That was the way. It was framed as an equity issue. We can't assume that kids have, they can't have their.
What a disaster.
Yes. They can't, not every child has a device. So therefore we have to give them the device. Whether or not they want it, whether or not their parents want it, they all need to have this. This is the only way that we're ever going to prepare them for the future. And, hindsight is 2020. I, in large part, bought into that because it made sense at the time. It was like, well, yeah, why would we, if kids need these devices, then why wouldn't we provide them? We shouldn't expect families to provide this to them. And why should teachers have to do all these workarounds? I used to write articles about, what to do when you only have 5 computers in your class. How do you set this up for stations and those kinds of things? And then more and more schools went to the one-on-one, and teachers are like, I don't like this. This is not working. This is changing the way that my students interact. It's distracting them. I feel like I'm just monitoring what they're doing online. This is not teaching. This is not learning as I know it. And it has not gotten better. We thought maybe it was just like a little learning curve because, as you said, it was a great rewiring of schools. Maybe it'll get better over time as this becomes the new normal. It has not. Kids don't seem to enjoy it, and teachers are not enjoying it.
That's right. There's so much to say here. So first, let's approach this discussion with this fact. If you look at the people who created this technology, if you look at what they do in Silicon Valley, how do they educate their kids?
Waldorf schools, no devices.
Exactly. They send their kids to schools with no devices because they know how addictive and destructive these things are for children. So the people who made it know it best. They want your children to have it, but they don't let their children have it. And that, to me, sounds like what drug dealers do. Drug dealers never give their drugs to their kids, but they want your kids to have them. So the idea that this is an equity issue, I understand the motivation. If we go back to the 90s, when the early internet was so amazing, and it really was, and it wasn't that harmful. It wasn't controlled by a few companies. It wasn't trying to addict you. It was this incredible playground. You could get all the information in the world. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And it's true, of course, that wealthy families could buy computers and poor families didn't. And so the equity argument was quite plausible in the 90s. I don't know whether it was right or not, but it sure made sense. Okay, so then, and as I show in the book, the first wave of technology, which is the personal computer and the early internet, those did not harm mental health. There's no sign that teen mental health got worse at all. And also, democracies were getting better and better. So it's like the world's getting better in the 90s. We're all techno optimists. But what I show in the book is that there's a second wave, which is social media, which comes in 2003. It's MySpace, Friendster, and Facebook. Those are the big three. So teenagers are getting on social media, and it's playful at first. There's no algorithm. There's no news feed. It's just you connect. So early social media wasn't particularly harmful. And then you get the iPhone, which was amazing too. When you put the two together, Instagram was the first social media platform created exclusively for the iPhone. You could not use it on your computer. You had to have an iPhone to be on Instagram. So we're all techno optimists still, and we're thinking now. And some rich schools did have laptops. Some rich schools did go for this. Not in Silicon Valley, but so it made perfect sense to think that this was an equity issue. But let me actually show you. It turns out it's exactly the opposite. Exactly the opposite. Here are some things we know. When you look at the amount of time that kids are spending on screens outside of school, the average depends on which study, but the average is 9 hours a day average entertainment screen time, not counting homework. This is swiping, watching Netflix, everything. 8 or 9 hours average. It's a little, but if you look at it by social class or race, it's 2 hours higher roughly for low SES and 2 hours lower for high SES. The equity issue is that rich families, you have two married parents, you have money for babysitters, you have money for all sorts of things. They're able to control it. They're able to put limits on. Most wealthy families, two college educated parents, they tend to put some controls, constraints. It's a constant source of conflict in the family, but they're able to keep it down. Whereas you have a single parent who has 2 or 3 kids and has a job. What are you going to do? I mean, the iPhone looks like the best babysitter in history. You give your kid your old iPhone, like we all have one in a drawer from 3 years ago. You just give it to your kid, and she shuts up, and she seems happy, and you can do what you need to do for hours at a time. Now, you could achieve the same effect by giving your kid morphine, and in some cultures, they do use opiates to soothe children. We don't think that's a good idea. But my point is that when we look at the damage being done, whatever metric we use, more of the damage is happening to low SES kids compared to high, to Black and Hispanic kids compared to white and Asian, and to single parent families compared to married parent families. So yeah, it's an equity issue. Get the computers and the laptops the hell out of the desks and the schools of kids in lower SES neighborhoods. They're the ones who need the most help getting offline, which is why phone-free schools is the most important policy that every school needs to do. In addition to the benefits it confers on everyone, it especially helps the kids from low SES families, because this is 6 or 7 hours a day that they can get screen-free. And once they leave school, it's screens all day long. And so if we want to give them at least a little time to look people in the eye, to develop interpersonal skills, to listen to the teacher, to try to work something out for 5 minutes continuously without an interruption, we have to go with phone-free schools. It's a huge equity issue now.
And it's like it's flipped on its head, because it used to be we had to get the devices to them. Now it's this is the only screen-free time they're going to have potentially is in schools.
That's right. And I should just add, I'm sorry, just one more thing to add, just to finish that part of the story, which is now that we have so people are expecting that the NAEP is down since 2012, and especially since COVID. People were expecting a COVID bounce. Didn't happen.
Did not happen.
There's no post-COVID bounce.
Nope.
Secondly, when you can find them online, and I've got them in my talks. When you plot NAEP scores and also the TIMS, test in mathematics and science, whatever. When you plot any of these longitudinal surveys of educational outcomes by social class or by quartile, that is, what's happening to the top quarter, like those who score in the highest quarter, what's happening to them? Answer, they're not really down since 2012. They're down a little, but there's no big dramatic drop for the top performers. Look at the bottom quarter. That's where all the drop is. It's the bottom quarter that has been devastated. Their scores are substantially down since 2012, not just since COVID. Of course, they were hurt worse in COVID too. But again, if we care about equality of outcomes, if we care about improving the education for the least advantaged, we've done exactly the opposite. Of course, by accident, we were misled. These things were pushed on us. Our school districts often said, you have to, some teachers tell me, the instruction came down. You have to work the technology into everything. They were forced to do it.
Yes.
And it was terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's going to be really validating for a lot of teachers to hear, because this was not a teacher-led decision in many cases. And then talking about expecting the pre-COVID bounds. I was just talking to a third grade teacher in California where they did remote learning for 3 years. And she's like, this is the
California.
this is the first year that that incoming third graders have been in-person learning their entire lifetime. They did not have any COVID impact.
That is so horrible.
Well, her point was she was thinking that they would, things would go back to normal. Now, finally, they were so excited. This group of kids now is going to be ready to learn. They're going to have the interpersonal social skills, the attention span. So it did not change. It's the same thing. And it's so depressing to her and her teammates, because they're like, there's something happening to our children. There is a rewiring. And I would say not only just of children's brains, but adults' brains too, even though I think you make a really compelling case for why developing brains are more impacted by this. But all of us are being impacted by these things. And it is changing the way kids are showing up.
Yes. There was just an article in the Financial Times last week. If anybody goes to, there's the paywall on that. But if you go to Twitter and look at my account, John Haidt, you'll find my tweet where I summarize the article. And what the reporter did there was he took a bunch of studies of people's ability to focus, concentrate, and even read. There are a variety of surveys that ask people how much trouble they're having, ask kids and adults, and there are a variety of studies that give them tests of concentration. And what he shows is that beginning around 2014, 2015, cognitive difficulties increase in teenagers for sure, and we draw from the Monitoring the Future study on that. There's very clear evidence, but even for adults. And so this brings up the point that you made, that we're all feeling overwhelmed. It's harder for us to focus because there's 100 things coming in, and if we're doing something and it gets a little bit boring, we know our brain knows there's something more interesting over here. So it's affecting all of us. But we adults, we're done with puberty. The brain rewires very rapidly from early puberty through, the rewiring slows down in late teens, but it's really from early puberty all the way through 25. The brain is rewiring into the adult form. And if you disrupt it then, there's a chance that the changes are permanent. So the brain is still flexible. I don't want to say that those third graders are lost, but we're going to really have to work with them to restore the skills while their brain is still plastic. So I'm hopeful for the younger ones, especially, because puberty is such an important time. So the pre-pubertal kids, I think if we work on it, I think we can get this. But let me ask you a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So we all need to understand what happened. How did we get suckered into this? Angela, can you tell me, why did the schools all take in the Chromebooks and the iPads? Did the companies push them? Did they give them for free? Did they give them subsidized? How did it happen that the schools pushed the teachers into adopting it?
I think that there were deals made. I think, yes, there was some subsidies. I think some title funds were used. So in low SES communities where you receive Title I funds, the Chromebooks could pay for it. And there was this idea that this is what the future is going to be. And we need to get this into the hands of kids. But I don't think that it was teachers who were asking for it. I think teachers were, in general, really frustrated because it was requiring them to change everything about the way they did. Everything now needed to include technology. And a lot of the evaluation standards were changed. So if a principal walked in and you weren't using technology, you could get marked down on your evaluation for that.
Wow. So that makes sense that teachers weren't asking for it, but thought leaders were saying we got to go this way. Common sense made it seem as though this is the way of the future. So what you're saying is it was mostly a sort of a good faith effort, at least within the schools. People really honestly thought that they needed to do this for the students' achievement, for equity. And I'll just drop in here. that the country of Sweden, which was one of the first to digitize everything, Sweden's very progressive in a lot of ways. They were even ahead of us in moving everything onto technology. And a year ago, they announced it was a huge mistake, and they're undoing it.
Oh,
They are removing all the stuff from the classrooms, especially in primary school.
wow.
And UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Social, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
they've had a number of reports. UNESCO in 2023 put out a big report basically saying it looks like this stuff is backfiring. And there's an amazing book called An EdTech Tragedy. If you just Google EdTech Tragedy by Mark West, who worked at UNESCO, and it really lays out what UNESCO found about the devastation that this technology is causing to education around the world. And again, the core idea is that whatever theoretical benefit there is, when you put a multifunction device in front of a student, they're going to do multiple things. The distraction effect swamps everything else. That's true for my graduate students at NYU.
Mm-hmm.
They can't have a computer. I have an absolute no screens policy in my classes because I've learned from experience. 27-year-old MBA students, if they have their laptop open, they can't help it. They're multitasking. How do we expect 7 or 8-year-olds to focus if they have a computer or an iPad in front?
How do your students take notes?
On paper. I make the slide, I have slides on the screen. I use technology to present, and I make the slides available to them so they don't have to write down what I have on the slides. And I say they all have to bring paper and pencil to school. And while there was some hesitance about this when I first started it 2 or 3 years ago, by the end of even a few weeks in, they all say it's better. And now so many of us college professors are doing this because we've all seen the damage. So many college professors are doing it. And the students say it's better. They like the class better. I mean, these are MBA students. They're paying a lot of money to come here. Why do they want to sit there and be on Twitter or online shopping or texting? Because we can't help it. These things are made to be addictive. We can't help it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that same thing is true with K-12 students when you initially start talking about no phones in schools. And what you propose that I really like is, having the Yonder pouches or someplace where the phones are away and they're not even looking at them at lunchtime or in between classes.
That's crucial. Yes.
Go ahead and talk about that first before I make my
yeah.
point.
Yeah. So most schools say that they ban phones. What they mean is we have a policy. You're not allowed to take out your phone during class, which is not a policy. That's what they have in New York City. My kids say what that means is that you have to just hide your phone in your book, or you put it in your lap, or you go to the bathroom, but they're on their phones. If anyone is texting, everyone has to check because nobody wants to be the one kid who doesn't know about the thing that happened in third period. So that's the first thing. You cannot have the phones on the kid because it's like asking heroin addicts to say, you must keep your heroin in your pocket. You are not allowed to shoot up during the day. So that's the first thing. The second is that part of what's happening in school is that it's really not fun. School is just no fun. And it's in part because they don't have much of a social life. Jean Twenge and I have a paper where we tracked PISA data, the international education data. Loneliness in school was stable in the early 2000s all the way to 2012. And then what happens? All over the world, East Asia less so, but all over Europe and America, school loneliness in school goes up after 2012 because what happens? You and I remember laughing with our friends in school, right? Do you remember laughing a lot? Like you're joking around, you're teasing, you're running around. And so the fun part is lunch, recess, and then in between classes if you're moving classrooms. Imagine all of that going away. Imagine hallways being silent, which I'm sure all of your teachers have seen. When the ban is only on class time, the kids will flout the ban during class time, but boy, are they going to grab their phones in between classes. And the most exciting thing for me about phone-free schools is that the reports always say this same thing. They always say, whenever a teacher is interviewed or a principal is interviewed in the newspaper about what they saw, it's always the same thing. We hear laughter in the hallways again. Yeah, it's loud in the hallways. It's loud at lunch. Kids are having fun again. And so you've got to have, it has to be away for the day. It has to be bell to bell. Some people call it a distraction-free school. I think that's actually a very good label.
Yeah, I love that.
I put out the term phone-free schools in an Atlantic article 2 or 3 years ago. That's what we're aiming for. But I think the term distraction-free school is even better because now it explains why you got to get rid of the one-to-one devices, because those are huge distraction agents.
Yeah, and it points to the purpose. It's not phones are bad, it's
Yeah, it's
distractions are the
focus is
problem.
good.
Yes,
Yes,
focus is
yes,
good,
exactly.
exactly.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to start using that term more. Distraction-free schools. I got to be a proponent of that term.
I do really like it. So, and that ties in perfectly with what you were saying about, your MBA students actually liking having to take notes. It's weird at first, and they get to it. And it's the same thing when schools have these distraction-free policies where there is no phone use at all during the school day. As the kids are initially reluctant, there's ways to get buy-in and to help them understand it. But almost universally, I've never heard of a school that has tried this and then said, the kids and parents hated it so much we had to go back to
That's
letting the
right.
kids use their schools.
That's right. It never gets undone
Never.
because while you have kids objecting beforehand and in the first week, it always seems to be 3 weeks. That's what I often hear.
Yes.
By 3 weeks, they realize, wait, this is fun.
Yeah.
We're actually having fun in school.
Yeah.
And to be clear, we're focusing on both mental health and learning, but some of the biggest changes that schools notice is behavioral problems and tardiness. When school sucks, when it's just more swiping and drama and bullying online all day long, they don't want to go to school. But when school becomes fun again, then they actually want to come to school. And the other thing is, so much drama happens on the phone. A lot of physical fights, they either begin with something that happened on social media.
Yes.
Or in some schools, the kids, because they're all focused on social media, not on the class. The way you get prestige is by having posts that go viral. So they'll lure a kid into the bathroom, beat the hell out of him in order to get a video. And so you've got kids being beaten up, like severely harmed, so that other kids can get a video to post online of the beating. It's sick, it's inhumane, it's cruel. And so there's just no argument. There's just no argument for leaving the phones in the hands of kids. Oh, I'm sorry, wait, there's one argument. I'd like to deal with it. The main pushback is from parents who say, what if there's a school
emergency
shooter?
Yeah.
What if there's
What a tragic thing.
I know.
What a tragic thing to think that way, that like, rather than fixing that issue, we'll just let kids be on their phones all day.
Right, because of the remote chance of a school shooter. But here's the thing. Here's what I say. Here's what any administrator, I think, should say. My kids went to New York City public schools. One is my daughter is a sophomore. And if there was a shooting, every time we hear about this, every parent feels the horror of what would happen. So if there was something like that at my kids' schools, I would desperately want to hear their voice. I would desperately want to talk with them. But we have to do what's best for the kids, not what's best for our feelings in them.
Right.
And all the security experts, they all say the same thing, which is, if there was an actual shooter, the last thing you want is every kid pulling out his or her phone,
right,
calling their parents, making noise, crying to their parents, not listening, not noticing. The parents rush to the school. They block the school. The emergency responders can't get there because there's so many cars. So the last thing you want is everyone on their phone if there's a school shooter.
Right.
What you want is for the kids to be quiet, pay attention, do what they practice to do what they drill to do, follow instructions. And if something happens, you want them to be alert and take action. You don't want them on the phone. The phone's not going to protect them. It's not going to help them.
Right. It's not going to protect them. They're going to be distracted by texting and then not paying attention to what the directions, and also just their awareness, their surroundings.
Exactly.
In that moment. I want to circle back to something that you said about school being fun again. Because I had sort of an aha moment when you said that. I mean, we talk a lot about making our lessons more engaging, making lessons more fun. And that's part of the impetus for using technology, is that it makes it more engaging for kids. Maybe it's more addictive for kids too. Like, we're kind of tying into that. But it's interesting to think about school being more fun when they have that experience that we had growing up of, you go to school to see your friends. That's a big motivation. Right. And you're going to have fun with your friends. And yeah, recess and lunch are going to be fun times. It's not going to be, I need to pull up my phone and check to see what people said about me online. And what if that was a way to make schools more engaging, to increase attendance, to reduce tardies, to think about, like, how can we create these really meaningful social connections for kids offline like we used to have? And realizing that, like, yeah, maybe the lessons are not the most fun part. They weren't when we were growing up. But the social piece, that's the piece that
Exactly.
really pulls kids in.
Exactly. So 2 points. The first is on the tech can make things more engaging. I'm sure it is more fun to learn math with a game. But here's the terrible thing about that. If you gamify a third of the school day, if a third of the school day is spent with kids on apps that are gamified means you make a response, you get feedback, you get a reward, you get a little bit of dopamine. And so if you're doing that for a third of the school day, you might actually get more engagement during that third of the school day. But you're resetting their brains. You're literally making the dopamine circuits less sensitive to stimulations, that it takes more stimulation to get to feel normal. In other words, you might the gamified part might be more engaging, but that will cause the rest of the day to be less engaging. They are literally more bored the rest of the time. So don't be snookered, don't be tricked by consultants saying, we show higher engagement when kids use our game. Don't believe them, because you don't want that. So that's the first thing on the engagement with the learning. But the more important piece is what you were saying about fun, play, socializing. And so this brings up the other half of the book. The book, I can summarize it by saying we have overprotected our children in the real world. We've underprotected them online. Everybody wants to talk about the phones, the iPads, the computers, and that's really important. We can take action on that today. So that's powerful. But the other half of the story is about play. And it's really important for people to understand that we're mammals and all mammal babies play. This is how we wire up our brains. In studies show, I referred it in the book, when you raise monkeys and rats are very sociable animals. When you raise them without play, and there are ways to do it, even you put them together, but you block play, they come out anxious. They don't develop confidence. You put them in a new environment, they shrink into the corner with fear. They don't go explore. So play-deprived mammals are anxious mammals. They have not learned how to deal with the world. They have not learned how to deal with each other. So it's a terrible thing to deprive children of play. We've been doing that since the 80s. That report, A Nation at Risk, came out in the 80s, and we all, everybody freaked. Oh my God, Singapore's ahead of us. We've got to lengthen the school year. Don't give them so much summer vacation. Cut recess, cut gym, cut everything that isn't sitting in your chair learning math, science, or English. And this was a terrible mistake. And this is part of what made school less fun. Well, it turns out that kids, and especially boys are just, they have more, boys play more running around. Girls' play is more imaginative and smaller groups. Boys especially like to have teams and do competition. And so recess is really important for all kids. But we're seeing girls have been rising and rising relative to boys. Boys are dropping and dropping.
Right.
And so recess play is especially important for boys, but it's important for all kids. We all had fun at recess. And so to take that away, so what I want to say is, actually, if you don't mind, I'll just lay out the 4 norms of the book here, because we can solve this problem if we do 4 things. And then the fourth is we'll come back to this here. So no smartphone before high school. Parents should not give their kids smartphones. Give them a flip phone or a phone watch, nothing that can reach the internet until high school. The second is no social media until 16. Parents should keep kids off until they're 16. I'm hopeful that we'll get laws that will do that. Florida has passed such a law. Australia passed such a law. The third is phone-free schools, which we've been talking about. And the fourth is far more independence, free play, and responsibility in the real world. We've got to give kids back agency, fun, doing things together, ideally without any adult supervision. That's how kids learn to be self-supervising and self-governing, is by giving them practice. And so schools can do so much more to restore recess. In the book, I report a stat. Federal prisoners in a federal penitentiary are guaranteed 2 hours of yard time a day. American elementary schools often give them 25 minutes. And sometimes that's combined with lunch. So we're really hurting our kids when we cut back on recess. And just bringing more play into the day would make school more fun, which would increase engagement. For the boys, it'll really increase focus. When boys have run around and to sit down, they're much more ready to learn than if they've been sitting for hours.
Yeah, you're really speaking teachers' language here because the reduction and removal of recess has been a thorn in teacher side for years. I mean, it's so obvious that kids focus better when they have that opportunity. So that's one piece of it, and then also from kindergarten teachers about there used to be blocks, there used to be dramatic play
Mm.
centers,
Ugh.
and making
Oh
that
no, those
so
are gone?
academic.
Oh my
Those have
God, what
been
is it now?
gone
Ugh.
for decades. Yeah,
Oh, that's
that yeah,
horrible.
that started going away when I was student teaching in the
Oh
90s.
my God. So wait, but it still is is that still the focus of pre-K? Blocks and play? Or
Pre-K,
is pre-K
yes.
getting
Yeah, it's
academic?
become more academic as well, but there are
Ugh.
still centers and play-based learning. So, early childhood educators have always known the importance of this. And I think
Yeah.
educators in general understand the importance of play and bemoan taking away
Yeah.
recess. And what's so bizarre to me is, we always talk about, well, we have to follow the research, and what's best
Mm.
practice. Well, the research has always said that kids need breaks, that kids need to move, that kids need fresh air, sunshine, nature. There's no research that says kids should be in their seats 6 hours a
That's right.
day. But for some reason, the onus is we ignore that research, and the onus is placed on teachers where now you have to put the brain breaks in your day. You have to find ways for kids to move. They just need
No.
recess. They
They
need
need
this
recess.
free,
That's right. That's what they
independent
need.
exploration time. And you make such a good case for that in your book that, like, we can't have structured activities for children all the time. They
No,
need
they
to make
need
up their own
unstructured
games.
play. Yes, yes, yes. That's right. So there's a very sort of compelling fallacy, which is if I want my kid to be good at something, the earlier I start him, the more he'll rise to amazing levels.
Hmm.
So, I want my kid to be a world-class violinist. I'm going to start him at age 3. Okay. Now, with music, I don't know. That might be true with music. But as I understand it, the educational finding is that you don't get any benefit from starting kids earlier on math or things like that. You don't
Hmm.
get any benefit. In Finland, I think this is true in Scandinavia, but I know in Finland, they don't really start the academic stuff until age 7.
Right.
Before age 7, it's just play, play, play. I mean, you learn to read. You got to learn the alphabet, learn to read. But they don't really push the academic stuff till age 7 because you don't get an advantage from starting early. You get a disadvantage from suppressing play. If you want kids to end up in a really advanced state of education, let their brains develop properly in a healthy way with good social skills and an ability to pay attention, which will be enhanced by recess, not damaged by it.
Yes. So the teachers are bought in on this. What can we do about this, John? Like, how do we change our schools in this way?
Yeah. Well, you know what? So I've been speaking to a lot of school superintendents since my book came out a year ago.
Good.
I have so many, I have so many invitations to speak at schools, but and I just don't
Great.
have much time. So what I've decided to focus on is superintendents. So I just
Yep.
spoke at the California Superintendents Convention. Tomorrow I'm speaking at to all the superintendents in Connecticut, and the superintendents. I mean, I love them. They're so enthusiastic. They seem to really get it. On the phone-free schools, the big obstacle was the parents, but they want to go phone-free.
Hmm.
And so what I'm saying is, I think we actually have alignment here now. We didn't have it a few years ago. I think we now have
Mm-hmm.
alignment. The parents are now seeing that the devices are a problem. The teachers have seen it from the beginning. The superintendents, they might have been wowed by the consultants early on, but they're seeing the problems now too.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody seems to know how to deal with them. Things are not getting better. And I think we're all converging on the idea that the devices are the problem, not the solution. And so, again, we can't be 100% sure, but it's sure looking that way. We conducted a gigantic experiment on all American children by doing this without any control group, without good evidence of efficacy. We just did it. And it looks like it's been a disastrous experiment. And so I think we need to undo it. I think it would be nice now to undo it in a systematic way so that, let's say, a state or a school district, half of the schools we're going to take this entirely out of elementary school, get all the screens out of elementary school, and then let's see how that compares to the schools that don't do it, just for a year or two. And then if it works, then we do it nationally. Then everybody does it. So I'd prefer that it's done in a way where we can actually, get data on what works.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to do it. And I think we have alignment. But do you think? I mean, who do you think would oppose that? Who do you think would oppose a move for phone-free schools and no more one-to-one devices?
Just the tech companies, the
Yeah, that's
consultants
right.
and people who make money off of keeping it in schools.
Exactly. And
Maybe
they
some
tricked
people,
us.
yeah, maybe some people who feel like that's still like we need to prepare kids for the real world. But again, you're talking about we don't need to do that when they're 5, maybe in high
No, that's
school.
right. That's right. Yeah, you want to prepare kids for the real world? You want to prepare them for college? Send me a kid who has never been on a computer, but who can think and focus and has proper executive function and can pay attention, has
Mm,
good social skills. Send me that kid at age 18. That kid is going to vastly outperform kids
mm,
who've been on an iPad since they were 2.
mhm. It's exciting to think that there's momentum towards this, particularly since bringing the play back, bringing the recess back. I have seen school policies start to shift a little bit over the last few years. Everyone's just afraid of being left behind. If everyone else is doing a 90-minute math block and we only do a 70-minute math block so the
Ah,
kids can go outside, our scores are going to be lower. It's scary, I think, to make
well,
those changes.
that's right. That's right. So, well, tell me more about that. What are the pressures? I mean, when we think everybody says, "Oh, accountability, accountability,"
Yeah.
but if you have a metric for accountability, then that's of course what people are forced to teach to and to accommodate, and you don't get the other things that you want. So, tell me, how are teachers judged? Is it all by like a single test? Like, what's the ways in which teachers are pressed to just drill and kill or whatever you want to call it?
In many ways, yeah, it's the test score. It factors into their evaluation. The school also is reduced to those test scores. It's decided if it's a good school or not based on how they perform on tests. And it's risky to think, okay, we'll take away this extra math tutoring and let them play. What if that doesn't translate into better results? We better just sit them down with this worksheet and make them do that.
So I don't know. So I recognize this is a huge problem, and teachers are caught in the middle, and you're the ones with the best intuitions. You're the ones who see
Yes.
what's happening, and these policies pushed on you from above. Oh God! But here's the hopeful thing: things are changing faster than I've ever seen in my life.
Yes.
And I think part of the reason is because we were beginning to figure this out in 2019. So Jean Twenge
Hmm.
wrote an influential article in 2017 uh, uh, titled "Have Smartphones Destroyed a Generation?" And that's when I started really looking into this, in part because of Jean's work. And by 2019, I was beginning to publish on this. I was beginning to collect all the studies. And Jean and I were both out there saying, we think the phones are really hurting kids. And then, and what we were saying back then was what kids really need is less time on screens, more time outside playing. 2019. COVID
Yeah.
comes in March of 2020. Yeah, exactly 5 years ago. And what do kids get? Much more time on screens, no time outside playing because you might catch COVID outside. In New York City, they closed the playgrounds,
Yep.
they closed the baseball fields, the tennis courts. I can't believe what the city did to crush play, outdoor play, which would have been the best thing for kids. Instead, my kids rotted away, whether it's supposed to be online school. My kid, like they watched all these Netflix series, like literally 10 times. They watched The Office, the entire series, 10 times. And I didn't find out about this for years, that it was 10 times. And I said, how did you watch it 10 times? Well, during COVID class, we're all watching Netflix.
Hmm.
So anyway, it was a complete disaster. We've got to reverse it.
Hmm. Well, it is hopeful to think about the momentum sort of shifting in this way. And as divided as the country is right now, and as much controversy as there is in schools about how we should be teaching kids, this does seem to be a sort of bipartisan take that we
It
need
really is.
to get kids off of screens and that we need to introduce more time for free play.
Exactly. That's right. And that's what's so exciting about this. So, yeah, so
Yeah.
let's be hopeful. We've talked about this huge problem, but what I was trying to convey a moment ago was however big the problem is, it's incredible what happens when you get parents all over the world, and especially mothers. This is really driven by mothers.
Hmm.
What I've seen talking to people all over is that while fathers care about this a lot, but men are often a little bit more technophilic. They kind of often like the technology more, and mothers are more emotionally sensitive to. Mothers felt their kids slipping away more
Hmm.
than fathers did. Women are they're more open to and better able to read emotions in others. So what I'm finding is that there's basically a mother's rebellion all over the world.
Hmm.
And you even see this in politics. It's especially female governors, or it's the wife of a male governor who will initiate this. Um, so, so if you anger mothers all over the
Hmm.
world, okay, if you're tech companies, if you're ed tech, and the things you're doing are angering mothers all over the world, and many of those mothers are teachers, and many of them are legislators, and many of them are governors, and many of them are heads of state, guess what? Things are going to change, and they are changing quickly. So I'm really, really optimistic that however bad things are, everyone sees it now. And for
Hmm.
3 years, we couldn't see it because of COVID. but everyone sees it now. And so I think things are going to change.
This might be the first interview I've ever done in which I didn't ask any of the questions that I had planned. And the interview was way better. So I'm going to have to bring you back on another time to talk about the resilience piece, because that's really fascinating too.
Okay. Well, you know what? We still have a few minutes.
Okay.
Let me ask you, I need to know a few things. So one thing that I need to know is especially about younger kids. So in the anxious generation, I focused my research on teenagers because that's where the evidence was best. Social media, harming preteen girls, that's the clearest. So I really focused on adolescence and puberty. I have a little bit to say about elementary school. I don't know much about 0 to 5. So tell me what you're seeing or what you hear. When I speak to pre-K and kindergarten teachers, I hear a lot of them are saying kids are coming in with huge developmental delays, language delays. Some fewer kids are potty trained, like all kinds of problems. Now, was this COVID? Was it spending COVID on iPads? What was it? I don't know. But tell me, what are you hearing or seeing about younger kids, 0 to 5?
Yes, same thing. That it's not even that they're coming into, first grade not having learned what they were supposed to in kindergarten. It's that their first school experience is that they have not been socialized. They are not sure how to share things. They don't know how to take turns, how to wait, how to ask for things that they need in an appropriate way. Just a lot of those skills. And I think it almost has to tie into the fact that so many of them are given screens at a young age. I was noticing the other day when I was in a store that there was a 2-year-old in a shopping cart who waved to me and said hi. And I realized that was the first time that has happened in forever.
Wow. Because they all have an iPad or an iPhone.
Yes. They're completely buried in watching YouTube videos when they're in the cart. And this kid had a toy in their hand and was looking around and engaging with people and making eye contact. Yeah. And sometimes I think it's just as simple as that.
That's right. That's right. I think we're going to have to switch. We're going to have to come to see, I hate to put it this way, but if you give your kid an iPhone or an iPad, we're going to have to see it kind of like you're giving them a cigarette. That's overstating things. I don't want to, but the way we turned on that, the way we turned on tobacco and kids and even smoking around kids, we had a culture change that took a couple of decades, but we did it.
Yes.
I think we're going to have a culture change around this. Again, I don't want to vilify parents who like we did. My wife and I, our son was born in 2006, before the iPhone, and we used what we called vitamin T, which was the Teletubbies. We found that when he was 8, 9, 10 months old, if he was crying, we just turned on the Teletubbies, put him in his bouncy seat, and everybody was happy. So look, we all did it because it seems to work.
Yeah.
And we're just gonna have to learn. Like we have to find and the thing is, once you start doing it, then you have to keep doing it because they expect it. Yeah. But if you don't do it, if you give them the toy, a physical toy, then they learn to play with the toy for a longer period of time. And then maybe they're a little bored with the toy and they look around. Oh, hello. Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to be hard. I make it sound like it's easy because the solutions are kind of simple, but it's going to take a lot of work to implement them.
Mm-hmm. I want to close out the show with a takeaway truth. What's something that you wish every educator understood about creating a healthier, freer childhood for our young people?
Oh, yeah. I think, it would definitely be the play side. It would be, I guess I would put it like this. Play is a biological necessity. We evolved to play. Our kids crave play. It develops their social abilities. It develops their cognitive abilities. It prepares them to learn. So play is so essential. And so I didn't mention, I need to mention this. Educators, please go to letgrow.org. It's an organization I co-founded with Lenore Skenazy, who wrote the book Free Range Kids. Go to letgrow.org. The biggest thing you can do to improve the functioning, the social functioning, and I would say cognitive functioning of your kids is the Let Grow experience. And it costs exactly $0. The whole thing costs $0. All it is. So you go to letgrow.org, you'll download the toolkit that explains exactly how to introduce it. You just send your kids home with a piece of paper. Let's suppose you do it in third grade. Let's say all third graders, but you can do it any age. Let's suppose all third graders, age 8, I think is a really, really good age. And then also maybe at the beginning of middle school is another really, really good time to do it. But suppose you have all your third graders go home. They bring a piece of paper. It says, please talk with your parents and try to figure out something that you think you can do on your own with your parents' permission, but without your parents, something you've never done before. We have some suggestions. Maybe you can walk the dog and you've never done it alone. Maybe you can walk to a store or ride your bicycle to a friend's house or make breakfast for the family. Whatever. We give them some suggestions. And then once a month over the whole year, so you do it, 8, 9 times. Once a month, the kids do a project and then they come in and they just write what they did and they put it up on a wall as a little leaf. And before you know it, you have like a tree forming. But it's fantastic. The best ones are the ones where you send the kid out into the world. Go visit this person or bring them this thing that I need. You arrange with your neighbor 2 blocks away that I'm going to send them over with a book. I know you don't need the book, but just, whatever you do, just arrange it so that the kid can go out and do something. And then 3 things happen. The first is the kid comes back and they are jumping up and down. They are so excited. They've done something. They're useful. So that's the first thing. It really changes the kids quickly and makes them more confident and happy. Mm-hmm. We have research showing that it actually reduces anxiety more quickly than Prozac. Because if you do this once a week, you have 4 experiences in a month. That's how long it takes Prozac to work. Anyway, so it changes the kids. Also really important, it changes the parents. Because none of us know what's the right age to send our kids out. But if the school is telling all of us that this is homework, so, okay, I guess age 8. So it changes the parents. We send the kid out, and then we're nervous. I was anxious. The first time my son walked to school by himself when he was 9, it was a year ahead of the other kids, 2 years ahead. My wife and I were really nervous. And we tracked him on, I gave him my old iPhone. We didn't know any better. We tracked him, and we were so anxious that first day. But he made it. And then the second day we tracked him again. We were a little nervous, but he made it. Third day, we didn't even track him anymore because he's really competent. He's so good at orientation, even when he was 8. Anyway, so it changes the parents. We get less anxious. We trust our kids more. But when a whole school does it, something amazing happens because all of a sudden, you've got a whole bunch of 8-year-olds walking into CVS, walking into the supermarket, buying things, and walking home. No one has seen that since 1992. We knocked that out. Kids out in the world, no way. But they can do it, and they have to do it. And so you change the whole town. You change the norms. And if anybody's anxious about sending their kid out because they're afraid some other person will call the police, which occasionally happens, if you go to Let Grow, we have a kid license. I forget what it's called, but you'll find it's a little thing I invented. It's a card you print out, and it says, I am not lost. If my parents know what I'm doing. If you are still concerned, please, first, read The Adventures of Huck Finn. Second, think back to your own childhood. Were you allowed to walk around when you were my age? Third, call my parents. Here are their numbers. So if you give your kid that, then even if a nosy neighbor calls the police, they're much less likely to call Child Protective Services on you because it's clear this is a thing that we're doing. It's not neglect.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jen. This has been so insightful and I think just really validating for a lot of teachers.
Thanks, Angela. For more information, I hope everyone will go to anxiousgeneration.com. That's the central hub, anxiousgeneration.com. Good luck to you. You're on the front lines. You're facing pressures from all sides, but you guys are gonna help us reverse this. You're going to be the main players in rolling this back. We're going to go for phone-free schools and a play-based childhood.
Yes. Thank you for all of your work in this area.